So there's this wild story in Matthew 15 where Jesus effectively calls a woman a dog, which sounds crazy on its surface, but man, when you really understand what this verse is about, it will blow your mind. So the story basically goes like this. Jesus is walking through a crowd, and there's been this woman who's following them and crying out for him to help her daughter, who's possessed by demons. Now, the woman is Syrophoenician, which, if I understand correctly, means that she was Greek. And so she would have been considered a Gentile by birth, separate from the children of God, who would have been Israel at that time. Now, to really get the vision of the story, apparently this woman had been at it for a minute. So it's not like, she just kind of came by and was like, hey, Jesus, can you help me out? He didn't answer, and then she just left it alone. She had been following him for so long and making such a ruckus that the disciples actually asked him to send her away. And bear in mind, this whole time, Jesus is just ignoring her. Like, this woman is literally begging Jesus for help, and he just ignores her, which in and of itself is wild. But what happens next is just crazy. And so finally, after however long this has been going on, Jesus turns and responds to the woman and says, I've been sent for the lost sheep of Israel. Effectively saying, hey, you're not part of the family, so sorry, I'm not here for you. But then the woman comes and falls at his feet and says, sir, please help me. Now, this is where you would expect Jesus to have massive compassion, because everywhere else that we see him interacting with people in need, it's always with just extraordinary compassion. The woman at the well, the adulteress that's brought before him that he says, did anyone condemn you? No, then neither do I. Go and sin no more, right? I mean, everywhere throughout Scripture, we see Jesus showing just unbelievable compassion for people. And yet here comes this woman who is on her knees at his feet, begging for help. And he says to her, woman, it is not right for me to toss the children's food to the little dogs. Or in some translations, to their pet dogs, which is just almost worse. But this woman cannot be stopped. She says, you're right, sir, but even the children's pets eat the scraps from the master's table. Now, if ever there was an example of a mother's love or a parent's love, this is it right there. Zero ego. Does not care that there is an entire crowd of people and she is just embarrassing herself. Like, the levels of humility here are incomprehensible. And so Jesus responds and says, woman, you have great faith. Your request is granted. And that's where things get really strange. Because when you look at the context of this verse, if Jesus had said, woman, you have great humility, your request is granted, that would make perfect sense in this context. But he doesn't. He says, woman, you have great trust. And when you realize why he says she has great trust and not you have great humility, it changes everything. You see, what this woman demonstrated is that she understood that even the lowest of God's creation are still taken care of by the master. Another way you could put it is she was so confident in God's character and in God's goodness that it didn't matter what Jesus said. It didn't matter if he called her a dog, a scoundrel, the lowest of the low. She was so confident in his character that he could say whatever he wants, and she knew that he would still take care of her. Now, here's why I think this is important. If you go back to Genesis, what was the thing that caused the fall of Adam and Eve? Satan accuses God of having bad intentions towards them, and they are unable to evaluate him without eating of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. That was essentially the gist of the issue. And so what he planted in humanity in that moment was a doubt of God's intentions, so that anything that he does all throughout our lives, like we look at all the evil in the world and we go, well, how could a good God allow evil to be in the world? Or we look at the bad experiences that we have and we go, well, how would a good God allow these bad experiences to happen to me? And so all of these circumstances and experiences that we have, Satan takes those, he points at them and uses them as his evidence that God's intentions towards you are evil. And all of that is based on the original accusation that started in the garden. But what this woman demonstrated was that she understood what Jesus represented in the earth. You see, Jesus represents God's evidence that his intentions towards us are good. When we think about Jesus, we often think about it through the lens of sin. Like, God had this big problem with sin that he couldn't figure out how to solve, and he's like, well, I guess I'm gonna have to send my son to die in order to solve the sin problem. When the reality is that he could have just changed the rules. He could have snapped his fingers and the sin just goes away. Nobody would be the wiser. He's God, right? That's not the point of Jesus. The point of Jesus is to demonstrate once and for all what his intentions towards us are. And I think he gave this woman a supernatural revelation that that is who Jesus was. He is the evidence that refutes Satan's claim that God's intentions towards us are not good. And I think Jesus, knowing what was in that woman's heart, I think he used that situation as an opportunity to not only demonstrate who he was and what he was going to be, but to also demonstrate what it is that all of this is about. It's having trust in God's intentions. It's reversing what Satan planted in us, the doubt that he planted in us about God's intentions, and the evidence that he uses against us constantly to support that accusation. But this woman, I think she understood that Jesus is God's evidence. Jesus is God's counterpoint, the one that answers the question once and for all, are your intentions towards us good or evil? Because if they're good, then we can trust you. And what greater demonstration of his intentions towards us could there possibly be than sacrificing his own son on a cross on our behalf when we were at our absolute worst and our most undeserving?
Shh.